Hello everyone, it's Elizabeth from the Smart Stitcher. In this week's tutorial I'm going to take you through how to trace one of your own designs in Affinity Designer and then put that into a repeat pattern which builds on some of our skills that we've covered in our previous tutorials. I've got just a few examples of my work here where I've used this particular pattern, and you can see that I've got the length of leather that I've had sort of digitally printed, and then you can see what I've made that into, and I've got a couple of examples here of my kiss lock purse and also a tulip bag. One of the things I like to do when I start designing is to set up a page in my sketchbook, draw some squares for the pattern tiles, and just sort of doodle about. Now I've done my research, I've looked at all my sort of inspiration, and I'm just sort of playing about with ideas. I'll then sort of pick up on a square that I particularly like and start to sort of work into that a little bit more. I did think about doing a pattern within this one, but thought I would rather play about with some colour instead, because I just wasn't feeling the love for the pattern on this occasion. So as we said at the start in the titles, this is for those of us that aren't particularly tech savvy or are just a bit worried about using the technology. So if you are a whiz with Affinity Designer, this tutorial is not for you. So the first thing we're going to do is going to come up to File, and we're going to open a new artboard. So I'm going to click File and then New, and we're going to set this up. Now I quite like working with a sort of square pattern. Millimeters works well for me, so I'm going to set mine up so that I'm 100 millimeters by 100 millimeters, or if you prefer centimeters or whatever unit works for you, then pick that up and just change that with the document units there. I'm going to tick Create Artboard, and I'm also going to get rid of the margin because I won't need that for my particular piece. So once I've set that up, I'm then going to click Create, and we're going to create our board. First thing I'm going to do is give it a document name by clicking File and then Save As. This particular pattern I've called Fiesta, but I'm going to call this my V2. And we'll then sort of see what we can come up with. So we've saved that. Now what I would recommend doing as you go along is saving after you've done a few steps. Don't leave it too long before you save, in case there's an issue or if in case the sort of software closes itself down. The next thing I'm going to do is bring in a picture. So I can click on the little place tool here, and I'm going to come down to where I've already got my picture of my Fiesta pattern. So this is just a photograph I've taken on my phone of the sort of square within my sketchbook that I showed you at the start. And we can see here that immediately if we come over to our transform box, we can see that the picture is much bigger than the artboard. So I'm just going to come over and change the units on the picture so that they are the same as the units on the artboard, and click Return. And then I'm going to come up to click the Move tool, and I'm going to bring my square down so that it is on the same artboard as everything is basically lined up, so the artboard and the photo are together. Now you can see here we've got the green and the red lines. Green lines running vertically, the red lines running horizontally, and that means that our snapping is turned on. That's quite important to sort of get this into the right place. If you've got a picture that's a little bit uneven, you can always come back and just click the vector crop tool, and you can crop and sort of just bring in your edges until you're happy with them. Now I can see here I've got a little bit of an uneven edge at the top, so I just want to bring that down a little bit, and then I've got a little bit at the bottom here that's uneven, so I'm going to bring that up a little bit. The other option is of course to carry all your lines out to the edge, but what I'm going to do is just to sort of change that dimension. I'm going to click Move, and then I'm just going to make that 100 by 100 again in the transform box. There we go. And I'm just going to make sure that we click it so that everything now is in position. Oh, we've slipped. So as you're working, you may find sometimes, I'm using a laptop and there's sort of the keypad, that sometimes if you're moving your picture, sometimes things can slip. So just keep an eye on that as you are working, and it helps to be able to just sort of zoom in and out and to just sort of check how things are going. So what I'm going to do is just lock now this toggle and locked. Now that means that I'm not going to be able to do anything else with that sort of picture at the moment because it's locked. So anything else I'm going to be doing is going to be on top of that, which is fine. What I don't want to do is lose my sort of initial picture. I mentioned earlier a little bit about snapping. Snapping is a really good way of using the sort of the existing grid within the software so that you know when your cursor meets the edge of a line or the center line on your design that it will flash up with those red and green lines. So it's really handy to have it turned on so that you know some of your sort of key anchor points. So the first thing we're going to do with our tracing, and we're going to start off with this section in the middle, which is our S sort of shape. I'm going to click the pen, and I've given myself a nice stroke that I can see, which is this pink colour, and I've also then set the width of my stroke to 1 point, as you can see there. Now I find it quite helpful to enlarge what I'm doing, and if I show you, we're going to click on the edge to start off, and it's very nicely highlighted itself there with that sort of little yellow ball. So I'm going to click the pen in there, and what I want to do is get all the way around my shape, clicking the pen tool at key points within the design. So where I've got my snapping turned on, I can see that when I get that gold line, I'm in position. I'm then going to I'm not going to click every single bit of the curve because we're going to adjust the curves afterwards. So I'm going to just very quickly work my way around this S shape. Now because we're adding a colour filling, we want to make sure that we join the shape up once we've finished tracing it. So I'm going to just go around. Now where my design splits a little bit, I'm going to sort of pick that kind of best line. So I know that this is a sort of section within that shape, but I think the best line I get will be to come on just on the outside of that. So you can see now we're snapped to the edge, and this next bit is quite nice because we're just relying on the grid to help set us up and keep us in that right position. So I can come down and just use snapping to help there, and then I'm going to now work my way back along the underside of our shape. Now you might say, oh, but you're just sort of clicking randomly and you've got lots of angular lines and you're not following your shape. We will go back on how to edit the shape once the lines are in place. So our shape is now joined up, which is good news. I can come up here. Now if I just carried on clicking, you'll notice that it would carry on making lines. So I'm just going to do Control and Z to get rid of that, and in order just to stop the pen from working, you can just do Control and D, which sort of deselects your pen tool. And now if I wanted to, I could come over here and start tracing that shape. I'm not going to because it's going to get a bit complicated otherwise. To help me with my lines, I can add some fill to this particular shape. It depends on how you work really, as to whether or not you'll edit the shape with the fill in it, or whether or not you wish to edit the shape without the fill in it. It's entirely up to you. Sometimes I find it easier without the fill, just to enable me to get a shape, and then I can fill it to check and see how it's going. Now on here we've got some nodes, and at the moment things are quite angular, particularly within the shape. So what I'm looking to do, I can very easily select all my nodes by doing Control and All, and they'll all become highlighted. What I'm looking to do is to convert them to curves. So I'll come back and click in, and you will see that that's automatically given us some nice straight lines. I'm just doing Control and Z because I don't want my pen tool to start typing again. Now, as we look, we can see that the nodes that were right on the edge have now altered slightly. Now, I find that when I get to a point, I quite like to keep my nodes on the edge in particular angular. So I'm just holding shift and I'm clicking those two on that outer left edge there, and I'm going convert to sharp. And then I'm going to click the 3 at the top here. Again, I'm holding shift and I'm just going to convert them as well. And they're starting to look a little bit better. Let's just put a fill in to see how we're going. Okay. Now, with each of our nodes, we have some little bars that come out. And these bars can help us, twiddling these can really help us refine the shape again. It can help to just work in a little bit bigger, and you can start to just adjust the bars so that you get the shape that follows your drawing in the best sort of way for you. You can, of course, adjust the nodes individually just by clicking one at a time, making sure that it's highlighted in blue, and then adjusting it. Now, if you find that you might just want to pull out a line a little bit more, so I can see here that the line I'm following, I might want to just pull it out a bit more, so I can kind of click on it. You can see I've got a little blue line crossing my line there, and I can pull it out. I can also double click and add a node if I wanted a little bit more refinement. Similarly, if I reached a point where I felt I had too many nodes in one place, I can make sure that the node I don't want is highlighted and that's blue, and then just click delete and it will disappear. As it happens, I wanted that one, so I'm going to pop that back in. And then I'm just going to now adjust the bars and just work on refining this shape. Now, as I'm approaching the top of this shape, I can see that that's quite a big gap there. So let's drag the line and see how it looks. So I can see that there's sort of the handlebar on this one is curving in a little bit. Let's see if we can balance that out a little bit more. Sometimes just pulling the arm up. There we go. And to maintain the angle, I can just bring that node back down so that I still keep that nice crisp edge. And it might be that once you've got a few shapes in, you can come back and start to just work into and define the other edges within your shape. Enlarge, work your way around. I'm not happy with how that line has responded there, so I'm going to pop a node in, and then I'm going to bring it out a little bit more. I'm going to adjust the handlebars so I get a nice smooth curve. And I'll just keep going. There's a little bit more here. So again, I'll try pulling it out. See how it's looking. That one I might push in a little bit more. And again, you can slide the node up and down the line to experiment with different effects as well. Zoom in, zoom out. Let's put a fill in to see how we are looking. So I might just click out of that now and say, okay, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to now move on, give my layer a name. So I now know that all of my particular adjustments, if I wish to come in and adjust this level, I've got to make sure that I've got my named layer highlighted in blue, and it then means I can come in and adjust. The next thing I'm going to do now is come back in, click into my artboard again, and I'm going to click the pen tool. I'm going to make my stroke, and let's make it 1 this time. I've changed colour because I'm going to be working on a different section. So I'm going to actually be working on this kind of underbelly of my centre shape, and I want to again create an enclosed shape that I can then fill without the fill running away from me. So let me make this nice and big, and then I'm going to start at the base, because I want that to sort of taper in quite nicely. And if I just run my finger up and down, I can see when it turns gold, I know that my lines are matched up because the snapping's on, so I can make that my first click. And then I'm just going to follow the shape, so you can see when you get that highlighted yellow shape, you know that you're in the right place. Now you could, if you wanted to as well, just have your smooth and sort of convert as you go, or just convert at the end. It's entirely up to you. There's always sort of more than one way of doing things. For tracing, I just want to get that sort of shape roughed out nice and quickly, and then I can come back in and spend some time just making it nice and refined. Now I can see here that somehow or another I forgot to change my stroke, so let's put that to blue, and we're going to come back down now on the other side of this shape. And this is where, if you're not happy with any of your pencil lines, you can just adjust and tweak to your heart's content. So making sure that I've got my blue layer highlighted, I want to have all my nodes highlighted so that I can convert to smooth, but I'll just come back and tweak the bits where I want to keep a nice point so that they stay nice and sharp on my final piece. Whoops, I don't want to join a line there. Let's come back in there. Now I'm just going to repeat that process. Again, we can fill the shape and start to see how it looks. And again, it's not looking too bad, but if we look at it, we can see we've got a few wobbly sections, and we can see that we need to work on some refinement. So again, we'll enlarge and we'll just work our way around the edge. I'm going to take the fill out for the moment so that I can see that I've got some white lines. What I don't want to do is to have any gaps showing between my pink and my blue layers. So as I work around, these gaps will look, you'll be able to spot them in your final piece. So say for example, if I didn't adjust this line here, this would show up as a white gap between our two colours. So what I'm going to do is just add a node in, and I'm going to drag it so that, there we go, we get that golden line. So I know that I'm in position, and I can just adjust the bars, just making sure that I'm bringing everything down. So that's all good there. And then exactly the same process, just work your way around and convert everything. And this is where it helps just to kind of zoom in and out. If you find that you've got a node you don't think you want, you can just highlight it and delete it. If you realise you needed to come it back in, Control and Z, and it will be there. Or if you didn't like the position, you can just very easily add another node in by double clicking the line with your nodes section highlighted. So we're almost there. Oh, look at this, we've got a bit here that I'm not happy about, so let's highlight that one and get rid of that one, and we can see that we've got a much better looking line. So let's try and drag this one over, and then we'll just adjust this little bit at the bottom, and you can see just getting those nice bits of fine tuning by using the bars either side of your node. Let me just do the same here, see if we can adjust that. Now you might be saying, oh well, actually I want this blue layer to sit underneath my pink layer, and we will absolutely sort that out in just a moment once we've finished tweaking. I'll give this layer a name as well, because when I'm come back to edit it, or if I want to add any more effects, then I've got to kind of know where I'm clicking in. Now let's just zoom out. Okay, so we've got our first two layers in, and I can see that I think I'm happy with that. Now at the moment it looks like it's kind of sat on top, and you can see that up at the top here and at the bottom here. In order to give the impression of perhaps that sort of going away, what I'm going to do is drag my blue layer underneath my pink layer. And this is quite a useful trick to know with your other layers, that if something is sat underneath the pink layer, then my pink layer is pretty much always going to be at the top of my list, with the other sections coming underneath. And of course, remember to save as you go along. Having created these two shapes, we've now covered the basic principles of tracing your design. I'm now going to continue to sort of work into the rest of the shapes in the background, following the principles that we've used. I'm going to make sure that my artboard is highlighted. I'm going to click on my pen. I'm going to just give myself a 1-point stroke, and I'm going to change my next colour. Now the colours I'm picking are for me to see easily what I am working with. Now they might well change when I come to sort of work into the design a bit more, but in order to enable me to get my sort of basic sections and building blocks down, I'm going to just sort of keep following that principle, and I'll change the layers as we go along as I need to. In terms of the sections I might tackle next, I might have a look at the sort of the drawing I've done and sort of look where things sort of continue behind shapes. Now as I'm working these particular shapes, I might decide, rather than sort of worrying about stopping to go underneath something, I will start clicking away, much like we've done. And remember, you can change your nodes as you go along or change them afterwards. It just depends how you prefer to work. But I want to work my way around, sort of clicking that particular shape. And because it sort of goes behind, what I can then do is basically, when I've finished my adjustments, I can then drag my new line down underneath my pink and my blue, to then sort of put it into position. So I'm now going to enlarge what I'm doing. I'm going to click the node tool so that I'm not going to do my pen anymore. I'm going to come in, I'm going to start moving my nodes about and adjusting my lines, and I'm using my sort of that sort of yellow box, but also the red and green to show the snapping, so that I know that I'm on the edge and I'm happy with my placement. So once I've finished adjusting, I'll then sort of do all of my adjustments, and then in order to make this particular one a little bit more in keeping with the actual design, I'm going to drag that shape down so that it sits underneath those two layers. Now obviously I'm going to go back in and do a little bit more adjustments, but I'm going to be then looking at my other layers in order to get a nice line. What I'm looking to do is to continue that shape behind. Sometimes I find if I sort of stopped at this edge and then try to restart at that edge, I probably wouldn't line up very well. But where I want to sort of keep that sort of flow of the line, I'll work on top and then move it underneath. And I'll just keep repeating that now until I've blocked out all of my coloured areas. My green section has been refined and I've slotted it into the right place. I've then been working on my red section, which you can see here. Now if I've got another section that's going to sit just on top of this sort of red section here, and in order to sort of make tracing that a little bit easier, I can come over to this my panel, my layers panel, and I can see there's a little section on the end there where I can toggle the visibility. By toggling the visibility, I can in effect sort of switch that colour off and on. What I've got to remember though, before I move on and start working on another area, is that I need to make sure that I click out of this one, because if I don't, and I then go and change my stroke or my fill colours, these changes to those two will be reflected in what I thought was my red shape. So I've got to make sure that I've just come back up to artboard 1, and that I've then clicked on my pen again, and I've changed the stroke, different colour again, this time sort of make it easier for me to see, and then I can continue with my drawing of my next section. Now that's, I'm going to sort of do this little bit of section here that sits on top of my red area. Now I've finished adjusting my yellow top piece that's going to sit on top of my red curve, and I can switch my red curve back on so I can start to see it, and this is where I may wish to sort of just go in a little bit more and give it a few more tweaks to make sure that I'm completely happy with it. Now this yellow layer needs to sit on top of the red one, but underneath the pink and the blue ones. So what I'm going to do is just drag this layer down so that it settles under, and then I can decide, do I want it on top of the green one, or do I want the green one on top of it? And I might pop it on top of the green one for the moment, just because I quite like how that looks, but I can always come back and change it over. So I'm going to start to work my way around, adding in the rest of my colours. And what I might also then choose to do once I've got some more colour in is to create a second artboard by the side of my first one and start to put my tile into a simple pattern repeat. Now I can just do this by mirroring and flipping and just put 4 tiles into a repeat, or, and this is coming up, we'll look at creating symbols so that you can set up your second artboard using symbols, so that any elements you change on your initial design tile in artboard 1 will then be reflected in artboard 2, and that can be quite handy sort of when you're a little bit further on in the design process. I sometimes just find it's really helpful to take my basic tile, pop it into a pattern repeat, as we've done in earlier tutorials, and then as things get a bit more developed, I can start to see where I'm not happy with lines that don't line up, or perhaps because of how the edges are coming together, I can see that perhaps other shapes aren't sitting quite correctly, or I've got to add in another shape to sort of try and balance something out. So I'm going to work my way around now and just block out the rest of these areas. So here we've got the completed tile that has been blocked out. I can sort of see I've sort of got a rough placement of all of the colours. They're not necessarily going to stay in that position, but that's kind of like, I know now that I've traced everything out. What's quite useful is to go around and just enlarge and just check for any kind of bits of white that are showing through. And as I was doing this earlier, I could see that just here this would show up as a little bit of white on my design. Now that doesn't necessarily look bad, but it might be something that you want to then sort of just tweak a little bit. So what we're going to do is, I could tweak either of these two particular pieces, but I might just pop a node in here and then just take that just over the edge, check that I'm happy with that overall shape, and then just make sure that I'm saving as I go. So do enlarge your work, do have a little bit of a look, make sure there isn't any kind of visible white space. With some of the layers, particularly if you know that you're sitting underneath, you can just take them, make them a little bit, the extension that goes underneath that bit longer to accommodate this, but do just have a good sort of double check. And then what I've also done is very quickly just sort of popped it into a very simple repeat, so I can start to see how the pattern is forming. And at the moment, I have to say, it looks like I've got a sort of a bit of a face and some sort of very long wavy hair here. So I want to sort of develop that a little bit with the pattern work. And then I can also use symbols to help me with that development, and that's coming soon. So in our next tutorial, we're going to have a look at the sort of ways in which we can use colour and use that then to sort of develop our shading within our particular tile. So thank you very much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.